Hello everyone. Here I am, Leif Spork here. This is my property that I've called Bloksberg. It's this is right off of M204 here. M204 is the second most traveled, most popular road highway in Leelanau County that gets you to all the interesting, exciting places. It's at this spot here. I am 2 miles from downtown Sutton's Bay, a half a mile from Lake Leelanau, 5 miles from Leland. 18 miles from Traverse City, about 18 miles from Glen Arbor, 23 miles from Empire, about 16 miles from Northport. This property is the most centralized piece of property in Leelanau County, meaning you're closer to all the towns and villages here than you are from any other place. People will say that the center of Leelanau County is Maple City because that's what it looks like on the map, maybe, and that's where they take the snow measurements, but that's really not the case when it comes to traveling and getting around. This location is here. If you go by the main highways, you'll be able to get to all the towns faster. You're more central here than anywhere else. There's no other properties right now available in Leelanau County that for 33 acres for this price. The property here is mixed hardwoods. It's really interesting property. I bought the property 2 years ago because it's 2 miles from where I grew up, and I was always looking for property. Or I was saving my money for a long time, and this property's got an interesting story behind it. A very obscure realtor. The person who owned this property before me was from New Mexico. He grew up in Sutton's Bay. The property was given to him at some point. He graduated from Sutton's Bay High School. He then moved to New Mexico with his wife. So there's never been any houses built on the property. The person who owned the property had one of his buddies try to sell it. And it was a very obscure realtor. He had a sign out at the road that was fallen over half the time, so like no one even knew it was for sale for very long, and it also went up for sale right when the market crashed. So, property wasn't selling very well then. So it was kind of neglected for several years. I made a bid on it like a year before I ended up buying it, or 2 years before I ended up buying it. They didn't accept my original bid, so then a year went by and I put in another bid and then they accepted it. So I got a really awesome price on the property. So if you're looking at how much the property cost, you'll see that I'm selling the property right now for what the property owner originally had listed the property for. But then, he listed it during the crash. So I ended up buying it like 6 or 7 years later after his obscure realtor did a terrible job trying to list the property. And the owner lived in New Mexico. So there's a winery. This sign right here is for a winery. It's the Bluestone Winery, which is a kind of an up and coming winery. It's right up there in the backside of Dean Rob's property. The courthouse, the county government center and courthouse, is right up over the hill. There's one property owner in between me and the courthouse. I shot a deer on the property this year for the first time. So the courthouse is great having it as a neighbor. There's a veterinary clinic. My neighbors are, because I'm here right in this corner, this intersection, it's another unique piece of property in that sense. You feel very isolated back in the middle of the property, so you don't feel like you're near these intersections. My one neighbor is there's a veterinary clinic right on that side, and in the back, like I said, there's a winery, and those are my only two neighbors. So the property has a 200-foot elevation approximately, maybe a little bit more, I think. So it starts here, and then it goes up. And if you're interested, I can show you some satellite images. I'll post some pictures. But there's like 3 really defined, unique valleys that make it really interesting when you're hiking through the property, and they all kind of funnel down towards the road here. There's a little creek that follows the road. That starts as a natural spring. So you have a natural spring. I don't want to call it a swamp because it really isn't. It's more of a kind of a wetland, but it's more of a meadow. It's not even like swampy, so you can really walk through it and not like sink in a bunch of mud. There's several, maybe 3 or 4 kind of groves of old red pine trees that were planted in like the 60s, which they did a lot back then. They did, I think the state of Michigan provided a lot of like pine trees for property and for reforestation. So there's these like kind of mixed rows of mature red pine trees. I think they're neat. Some people don't like them because they're not like, I mean, there's a whole like, I bet you there's at least 10 acres of not old growth, but like mature hardwoods. There's a valley of the maples, I call it, in the back. That there's about 20, at least 100-year-old maple trees that make a really like enchanting kind of valley. There's a really interesting grove of cedar trees that are extremely dense, way up on top of a hill, which is kind of unusual. So there must be some kind of underground spring that kind of comes up to feed those. There's several old rock piles that are from like when they were clearing the land, probably. I think possibly even from like maybe Native Indians. What else is there? There's the one. I mean, it's not when I first bought the property. I kind of was like, I don't like the looks of that. You can see the power line right there. So the power line kind of cuts this corner here. And then so you have this kind of area, there's probably about 3 or 4 acres right here that's kind of separated from the bulk of the property. So then you have that power line that goes through the corner there. I don't mind it. There's actually kind of an old trail that goes up along it. Kind of forms a natural kind of entrance into the property. It allows for a clearing. Deer kind of use it, so it's not, I don't mind it at all now. Of course, because I own it, but then there's also an old right-of-way that is now it's been changed. The right-of-ways here now. So there was an old right-of-way, so that's been overgrown now. So you kind of have a natural kind of an old road that's overgrown in the property as well. I'm selling the property, so I grew up 2 miles from here, and I was looking for ways to invest my property, and I never in my wildest dreams imagined. Well, I imagined I just didn't know that the opportunities of what could happen in my future going to Norway. And this property could easily have been put into I could have never bought it. I could have just kept my savings. But my grandpa always told me to have property, and he had this kind of these old sayings and stuff. So I bought the property thinking that it could conjoin my dad's property because I grew up 2 miles down the road. So it was something fun to have, for a couple of years. I bought it, not realizing what was going to happen in Norway. So I'm not desperate to sell it, but I want to sell it to help speed things up in Norway a little bit when I get back over there. So it's for sale for I think $279,000. The property was originally listed for $280,000 when it was listed in like 2008 or something, and then I bought it for much less than that. But like I said, the realtor that was selling it was an obscure realtor, and I got a good deal on it. So I'm willing to negotiate, but the thing is like this is like you can't find 33 acres in Leelanau County like this, centralized, so close to like everything on a main road, with the varied terrain. I mean, you'll find a field somewhere where someone's selling like 20 acres of a field, but give me a break. I mean, fields are cool, but this is like, I mean, you have meadows, you get on the property, and it's just like, it's really like you feel like you own a piece of like a national park or something. It's old property. There's old deer trails on it. I have the original. Another thing that's interesting is I have the original like plots. See, when the Homestead Act happened in the United States, in Michigan in the 1860s, the land was divided in I'll get in my car here. The land was divided into 160 acre plots. So all of Michigan was basically divided into 160 acre plots, and then and then I don't know how they did it, if it was a lottery or the pioneers would come out and they would make a claim. So they would somehow get a stake. Excuse me. They would get a stake, and they would, after the land was surveyed, they would claim one of those original homesteads, which was 160 acres, and they were required to maintain, I think it was 5 acres of that 160 acres, keeping growing, building, making what is it called? Making it nicer, making a house, garden, improvements. That's the word for it. Improvements. So they could keep the property if they made these improvements. I'm not sure who checked on them or anything like that, but so over the years, these homesteads, these 160 acre homesteads, were divided up with families would split the land up with their families, and then they would sell it, and so different parts of Michigan, this would happen everywhere. So like let's say you're in a middle of Michigan, where you have a lot of farmland and flat land and rolling hills and woods. So a lot of that property is still in big chunks of land because it was just there wasn't a lot of people moving there. Like here we have all these development because we're right on here in Lake Michigan, and there's varied terrain with the coastline, and with all the farming here with the orchards, and it's kind of hilly here. So the property was developed and split up, and it kept on getting split up. So what's interesting about this property is this was located right on a right in a kind of an interesting intersection where you have one shortcut that gets you to Sutton's Bay, and then you have the main road that goes across the middle of Leelanau County. So this property is right on this point, and it's hilly on one side of it, so it kind of had to stay together. You couldn't necessarily develop on it. There's lots for 2 houses, at least I think 2 houses could be built on it. People they want to buy it and make money, so there have been some attempts to buy it and have the zoning changed so they could build more than 1 house or 2 houses, or put a business on it or something. So there's been difficulty trying to get that changed. So instead they are so the property has been held together. I think it should be held together because it's amazing property, and for someone who wants to wake up and have little projects back in their land, which I have several friends whose parents have done that, who live here. It's great to have something like that here. Like I said, you won't be able to find anything like that here in Leelanau County for this number of acreage, the seclusion right in the center. I mean, occasionally properties up like Omena, there's a lot of farmland and flat areas, Maple City, Cedar area that are nice, of course, but it's much more quiet. It's much longer to drive to places. Not a lot longer, but it's just a little bit longer. So this is right, here we go. This is the winery right here. The road that my property is on is called Silt Road. It dead ends right there at an old farm, which is neat. I grew up right here, so I used to ride my bike and stuff back here. This winery, I don't know, it's probably 10 years old or 15 years old. Bluestone Winery. So they're my neighbor. There's a very defined property, kind of an old row of trees, an old rock wall kind of that divides our property, so it's very clear where the old property line is. And like I said, this property is unique because whoever owned the property, the person who I bought the property from was somehow connected to the original homestead, the homesteaders that owned the property. So this was the property that was saved out of the original 160 acre homestead. This was most likely the property that was saved by the original owner of the property through the years. So like I said, in 1860s, the U.S. government gave homesteads of 160 acres to anyone who laid claim to that 160 acres. Once they were given the property over a certain number of time, as long as they made improvements, and then they were given the deed. So that deed, it's called there's a name for it. It's like an original transcript, original documents of this deed, and you would only get that if you owned the original 160 acres. So whoever, let's say I own that 160 acres and then I wanted to sell 40 acres to my brother or my son, I probably wouldn't give that document to my son. I would keep it because I owned the original. So then, let's say I died, and then I still had 120 acres to my name. Well, then whoever I passed on those acreage to, then they would get those documents. And let's say that person wanted to sell 60 acres to their daughter, or their daughter's husband, or whoever. They would probably want to keep those documents because you're the original owner, so you want to keep those documents. So you don't want to give the original documents to someone that has. So I have those documents. So it's really neat because it's like a really thick, old, 150-year-old document of everyone who owned the property, what was done on the property, dates. It's all like written in old fountain ink pen. That tells you that this property was held on to the original owner. The original owner who owned this property held on to it for all those years, and that's something that you don't usually see, and that just tells you this was special for some reason. When you look at the original documents, you can see there was a lot of interesting things done on it with the lumber companies. So another one of those things that you don't usually get with property. So that's what's going on with this. So more than welcome to take anyone on the property. If you just want to stop and walk on the property, I took all the posted signs down because I don't really care if anyone walks on it or not. So that's the story with that. And it's for sale. So please, if you're interested, send me a message.